Welcome to the Healthcare Plus podcast, hosted by Quint Studer and Dan Collard. I'm Nicole Webb-Bodie, partner at Healthcare Plus Solutions Group. Thank you for joining us as we bring together leaders and changemakers from across the healthcare industry. In each high-impact segment, you'll hear about the latest challenges organizations are facing and learn how guests are rewiring solutions to drive real change. Plus, you'll walk away from each episode with practical tools, techniques, and best practices to implement in your own role and in your organization. For more information on your host or to listen to recent episodes of the podcast, please visit www.healthcareplussg.com/podcast. Now, I'm pleased to welcome today's host, Dan Collard, who will introduce you to our next guest.
Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Healthcare Plus podcast. My name is Dan Collard, and this again is a really special episode of our podcast because typically we have folks from the outside of our organization, HPSG, or Healthcare Plus Solutions Group. And the reason that this episode is so special is that this time we have somebody from inside the organization. So we have a real insider here. And the reason we have an insider is we're going to be talking about a very special book that is now available that has to do with what does the emergency department look like in 2026. And so joining me today is long time friend, first and foremost, and colleague, Regina Shupe. Regina, it's great to have you.
Hi, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
It's fun to be able to see you like this. Regina lives in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm going to have her tell you all about Regina. But we have the opportunity to see each other, several times a year, and so this is fun to be able to talk about your brand new book because I know you're excited. Let's begin by telling our listeners all about the world of Regina Shupe.
Oh my gosh, my world. Well, I'm a nurse by background, first and foremost. I have been a nurse since I was 19 years old. I started as a licensed practical nurse and continued my education for really the majority of my career, receiving my doctorate degree in 2015. I worked in the emergency department for the majority of that career, first as a staff nurse, which I absolutely loved, and then as a manager, director, and worked with Studer Group for 8 years in the emergency department service line, so coaching, operational and patient experience excellence in emergency departments across the country. Worked most recently through the pandemic, well, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, for about 8 years with the Christ Hospital Health Network in Cincinnati, Ohio, and was working a bit with Healthcare Plus Solution Group on a part-time basis, doing a little work, and now have decided to join full-time.
Well, and we couldn't be any happier that you made that decision. Let me also give you a chance to do a shameless plug about your family because your work in the emergency department sort of became genetic almost.
Yes, absolutely. So I have my husband that I've been married to for 38 years, and we have 2 children. Both are married and grown. My daughter is a nurse also by background, an emergency nurse, and she has her doctorate in nursing and leads two emergency departments and an inpatient behavioral health unit right here in Cincinnati, Ohio. So certainly exciting. We get to share a lot of great conversation around just this topic of what's the emergency department current day, 2025 and beyond, going to look like, and how
Yeah.
can we be successful? So,
I'm curious because I've known Shannon since she was
yes.
much younger. Did you
Yeah.
ever think she'd be following in your footsteps? Was it sort of a given? Was it a hope? What was that like
Yeah.
as you got ready to go to college and decide on a career path?
Yeah. And it was really funny because um, she started out real early on in her career as a teacher. She wanted to be a teacher and started there and, decided, no, that's not it. And then she said, I heard her speak one time when she was just a young nursing, just fresh out of nursing school. And somebody asked her, "Why did you become a nurse?" And she said, "My mother has always worked as a nurse, and she came home every day happy and excited. I never saw her have a bad day. Even though I know she did, I never saw that." And so she went into nursing.
Isn't that cool? It's one of those things we see now today that sometimes discourages children from going into healthcare when they see mom and dad coming home not having a great day. But you said something interesting about your daughter that she was first sort of going down the path of being a teacher, and I think in reality, knowing her and of course knowing you and your influence, she really is still very much a teacher,
Right.
as are you. And so
Yes.
let's talk a little bit about the Dan Collard Regina Shupe connection, because not only are you a colleague today, you were a colleague before, but our relationship sort of
Yes.
began in such a special way. I had the distinct honor of being your coach. Why don't
That's
you
right.
share with folks what that was like in the earliest of days?
Yeah. Well, and I was one of those staff nurses that became a charge nurse, that became a nurse manager, right? Well, assistant nurse manager and then a nurse manager. And I think I really moved through that ladder because I was a strong leader, just had natural leadership skills, but I was not a trained leader. I was a trained nurse. And I got put into this position as a manager. And thank goodness, uh, you know, at the time, I worked for a health system that had recently partnered with Studer Group, and you were my first leadership coach. And that made all the difference in the world in my career. It absolutely taught me how to be not only an amazing nurse, but also an amazing leader. So,
Sometimes I often say being a coach is really nothing more than seeing the potential in folks and sort of taking the cap off that potential, if you will. And
that's
that's
exactly
that's
right.
how I always describe our first couple of times together when I was in that coaching role. I just saw all this potential, and all I really needed to do, you were already good. All I really needed to do was take the cap off. And so it was so fun watching you just blossom as a
Aw,
leader.
yeah.
You never brag on yourself, so I'll brag on folks. Gina at the time ran an ED that probably had all the excuses not to be a good emergency department.
Yeah.
There were parts of the building they looked beyond its age there. You were in a part of town with a demographic that probably wasn't the kind that most CEOs would say, "Hey, I wanna go to that hospital and
Right.
and lead there." But given all the reasons not to have a good ED, you had the best. You actually had the best patient experience results in the entire market of what was then Mercy Healthcare in Cincinnati. And I just remember, it's sometimes it's easy to run departments in a good hospital, but you had a specific challenge that you met head on, and you did such a great job. So
Yeah.
we recruited you to our company, and
Right.
we had a good time together. You co-authored a couple of books
Uh-huh.
in our previous organization,
Mhm.
and then you went home. You went back to Cincinnati, and we were fortunate enough to say, "Hey, we'd love to have you come join our organization today at Healthcare Plus Solutions Group." So here you are, and I
Yeah.
remember one of the very first conversations that we had when you joined our organization, and that was, maybe there's another book there. Maybe there's
Oh,
another book to be had. And it was interesting because what you said was, "I think there's a book that goes right along with our whole theme of rewiring
yeah.
inside HPSG."
Yeah.
And rewiring means we're not gonna throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're not gonna get rid of all the good things that have gone on,
Right.
but we have to take a look at today. And I love the subtitle of the book, Innovative Solutions for Modern Emergency Care,
Right.
because no one wants to go into an organization as a patient, as an employee, as a caregiver, thinking, well, we're just going to practice like we did 20 years ago.
Right.
So let me ask you this. Did you have the ideas swirling around already, or was this something that you sort of had the theme and began kind of working on the ideas. What was that like to begin start? Because this is the first time also you're the sole author of the book, not
Yeah.
just the co-authors. 'Cause before you collaborated with some of our former colleagues, two, maybe three different colleagues in the book. This time, this is your baby.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Here's the thing. Obviously, at the Christ Hospital at Health Network, I was involved with the ED and ED experience. Um, but I will say now more than ever, I mean, after 3.5, almost 4 decades of being in emergency care, I've never seen systems so under such level of strain as they are right now. And I mean clinically, operationally, and emotionally, right? And those fixes no longer work. So as I started to think this through in that realm, things started taking shape. Things like, you know, how to engage a team. We have a lot of inexperienced team members now. In the past, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, people came into the emergency department with more experience, and you might have one or two team members who were really inexperienced. Well, now that's not the way it is. So you have to think through that lens. And we have leaders who are so um, underdeveloped, right? And they inherit um, systems and processes. And so the whole theme of, okay, rewiring, yes, absolutely. We need to look and say, is the way that we've designed this system really helping people inside it succeed?
Sounds like that was sort of like your inspiration. Let's talk about the inspiration to
Right.
write the book because
Yeah.
almost every book out there sort of began with a spark. And you talked about these new nurses that we have, quite frankly, the new leaders that maybe perhaps haven't been developed as leaders, and the opportunity to tweak or fine tune. What would you say inspired you to write the book?
Well, and I think just the complexity also of patients. It's just a strain and a load that we have not really seen this bad. And that it was like we needed this fundamental redesign of how we lead and support people and move our patients through care. And that has to be grounded in not only reliability and compassion, but hold on to your hat because I'm about to use a 4-letter word that I use in the book: love, right? Love, leadership, right? We cannot now power over people to make them work harder. We need to really love them through, right? And help them um, and be successful.
And maybe just maybe what happens as a result of that is maybe there's a child of a nurse out there that starts to see their dad or their mom come home happy again, like your daughter
Right.
saw you come home.
That's exactly
Maybe,
right.
just maybe, that's the outcome of one of the outcomes of the book, and we'll talk about outcomes later on. So
Yeah.
we get to this word rewired. The book is called Rewiring the
Yes.
Emergency Department: Innovative Solutions for Modern Emergency Medicine. Now, we talk about rewired in a really broad stretch of the word. When you think of rewiring the ED, what does that really mean? What would our listeners expect to
Right.
find in the book when it comes to that term rewiring?
Yeah. And I think what we're really talking about is just taking a step back and saying, just to my earlier point, is the way we've designed this system actually helping people succeed inside of it. So it could mean um, redesigning or rewiring flow. Maybe we haven't really diagnosed the issue. We see that frequently, right? That organizations take broad swipes at things that may or may not be a problem. So if we think about flow, and I go into that in the book, then we need to discuss the segments. Could mean, are we getting our patients back in 5 to 10 minutes? Are we getting them out within 180 minutes? That's what our patients want from us, right? That's what our team members and physicians want as well. So where in that process could we have opportunity? And thinking about redesigning the way we lead people, and we can talk about that also coming up. And what about the culture, so that we're not asking exhausted clinicians to compensate for broken processes, right? So it's really thinking about building reliability without losing compassion, so that patients can move through their care safely, and the people doing the work can actually thrive and enjoy their work like we always have.
It's interesting you talk about broken processes. I read a really interesting LinkedIn article the other day by a fairly new healthcare leader, a young gentleman that wrote this article, and he was talking about patient experience, and we'll connect directly to that later in the conversation. But he said something right in the middle of the LinkedIn post. He said, "You can't aid it your way out of broken processes."
That's
And I'm
exactly
thinking this guy probably wasn't even born when AIDIT was
you're
created. But boy, is he
exactly.
right. If the processes are broken, we
That's
can't
right.
look to a crutch and say, "Well, we'll just aid it our way out of broken
That's right.
process." So I'm really intrigued now to get in, but I wanna you mentioned one four-letter word, flow, and flow is always one of those big four-letter words in the ED, but I'm gonna come back to the original four-letter word you
Yes.
talked about. When I first read chapter 2, it was so fun because it's not how one might expect a book on the emergency
Yes.
department to start. So how would you define love leadership in a high
Yeah.
acuity, really busy, sometimes Friday night and gun club,
Hey,
ED? How would you describe
that's
that?
right.
And why did you choose to start there?
Well, and that's what is so funny, because there's probably people who will listen to our podcast, Dan, and they'll say, I worked with her when she was a nurse and she wasn't spewing that love language then. But you know what? You learn over some years, right? What it takes to motivate and to engage our team and love. When I talk about love and leadership, this really isn't a soft skill. This is a practical strategy, right? And it really is about partnership with people and not powering over people, right? A lot of times, we have a lot, like to my original, how we started this podcast, we have a lot of leaders who are very new in healthcare. And maybe all they learned from their leaders prior to them was power and how you utilize power to get things done. And that doesn't work in today's healthcare environment, not in the least. And it really takes somebody who is very partnership oriented. And that means that we're creating an environment where our team members feel safe. They feel seen and they feel supported, so that they can do their best work under the pressure and under the load that they're carrying. So it shows up in how leaders communicate, how leaders respond when things go wrong, how they care for the humans behind the roles, right? Our providers, our nurses, our support staff. And when leaders lead with love by building trust and clarity and belonging, then our teams perform better, right? Our patients feel it. And that resilience then becomes sustainable and not forced.
Well, and so you sort of set the stage for the rest of the book there, because if
Yeah,
if that's an environment that gets created,
that's right.
then the day-to-day stuff seems like it's more doable, that word that we use an awful lot there. But I'll also reflect, I see the four-letter word, I see the love word show up even in your coaching. I'll never forget the first
Yes,
couple of times you were with your first partner inside our organization, Hardin Medical Center over in
yes,
Savannah, Tennessee. I remember exactly what you said about him. You said, "I love this team."
I do.
And I think they probably felt that from you as a coach. And so what you were really doing was role modeling that work, because in essence, every leader is a coach. And if you can show them love through coaching, they can in
Yes,
turn then translate that.
yes.
And then you
Absolutely.
brought it around to resilience. You brought it around to this whole notion of how do we make it in an environment that's tougher than ever? And it brings another word up that sometimes gets burned out. Sometimes it's a word that causes people to roll their eyes, and that word is burnout. And yet we know it's real. It's
Oh,
it's a major challenge.
oh
And
yes.
and I'm just wondering, as you've been able to step back as both the in the trenches practitioner
Yeah.
and then the person a little bit further away as you look from the outside as a coach, what do people get wrong when we think about fixing burnout or healing burnout?
Yeah.
What do you think folks what are the missteps folks make? And then conversely, how is it that you can help with the book?
Oh, and I do. I love that chapter in the book. I love it. Um, I think where leaders go a little bit off is that they're viewing burnout as an individual problem, right? Instead of saying, okay, this is a system alarm. We need to really look. If you have one person in your department burned out, you have more, right? It's not just an individual. And we do things in the past like offer yoga apps and resilience training. Well, not that those are bad things, but right now we have working conditions that deny team members, let's be honest, the ability to rest, uh, feel safe. Some don't feel like they belong, um, and some don't really aren't connected to the meaning of why we get to do this work. So those simple fixes don't work anymore. And burnout isn't about team members lacking grit. Our team members have grit. Anybody who worked day in and day out through that pandemic, I certainly did. I was at that hospital every day, right? I saw nothing but grit, and people learned how to work without PPE and we learned how to do all kinds of things that we never thought. So it's not about that. It happens when good people are asked to survive in poorly designed or poorly run departments, right? And we have to be open to that. And the real fix is rewiring and redesigning the work itself and protecting recovery time. And I go into that, right? What is kind of that wellness triad? What are the things that we have at our disposal right now that we could be really good at using? But giving them recovery time, simplifying workflows, um, hardwiring psychological safety. If they are not, don't feel comfortable having the ability to speak up and say, "Ooh, this doesn't feel right," or I see something wrong," um, then of course they're gonna be burned out. They're certainly not gonna stay. They don't feel safe. So it's really showing up for people in moments of stress, right? When leaders own burnout as a leadership and design issue and not a personal failure, then the real healing can take place.
So what I really like about how you led from one chapter to the other is you sort of took on the tough stuff right up front.
Right.
Because it's one thing to say we can tackle left without being seen, we can tackle front end flow, back end flow, door to dock, etc. But you really took on the tough stuff up front. And when you take on the tough stuff up front, it's sort of like taking rocks out of people's backpacks.
Right.
It makes the workload lighter.
Right.
So then you get into the book and you hit with some really tactical,
Yeah.
practical resolutions for things. And then, interestingly enough, because people know us from all of our time together, and they know we focused an awful lot on patient experience. What I found really intriguing is that you put patient experience at the very end of the book. So this wasn't just another round on patients, use aid it, use,
No.
all the tactics. It was really
No.
let's tackle the tough stuff first. And then patient experience ended up at the very end of the book there. Was that intentional? And if so, why?
Well, yes, everything I do is very intentional, for sure, and everything with this book was very intentional. And look, if we get all the other things right, the patient experience is right there too, right? Because when we think about, and let me give you an example. If we're thinking about back to kind of the burnout piece, which is huge, um, the rewiring piece comes with really asking the right questions to our team members. Yes, I want to know if they have the tools to do their job and things like that. But what I want to also know is, hey, have you had an experience this week that's really weighing on you?
Mhm.
Um, right? It's kind of, and so in there, um, in all of these chapters, as we go through all this rewiring, the outcome of this book is a world class patient experience that we feel proud and privileged to deliver.
Yeah. Well, and there's no shortage of competition for the ED. We certainly have
Right?
urgent cares and
Sure.
freestanding EDs on every corner there, and the idea that we still want folks to trust us enough for the right level of care to be able to come to our ED. That's always been connected to a world-class experience there. But I wanted to call that out for our listeners because we weren't leading with the same old patient
Right.
experience tactics
That's
there
right.
as well.
That's
So
right.
so I get the
Exactly.
book. The book's now available on our website, and we'll give instructions for folks. Um, People always like to read books that give things you can do tomorrow. So if you look at the whole body of work, what might be one or maybe two immediate high impact actions that an ED leader could take right away?
My gosh. I think the biggest is consistently present in that unit, consistently present, just really being there. And Dan, we talked about when I was a new ED leader. Here's what the funny thing is that I loved emergency nursing, right? I just loved emergency nursing. And that was my comfort space. So as a leader, even though I wasn't really trained to be this, high-powered manager or director, um, where my comfort was being in the unit. And that presence really helped me because people felt very comfortable saying, "Hey, don't you think this is a little wonky? Or what if we did it this way?" And if I wouldn't have been there, and I give a couple of examples in the book also of leaders maybe that came before me that weren't really there. Well, you don't really trust them. So I would say really be consistently present, round with intention, and not to fix, not to defend, but just to hear what's happening and what's keeping people from really delivering the world class care that you want them to. And it might mean that you have to ask them that, presence builds trust. Right? The broken systems come to the surface when we're out there. It signals to the people that they matter, right? They love seeing their leader out there. So that's what I would say is my biggest, when leaders show up reliably and act on what they hear, then everything else, flow, culture, safety, patient experience, that all shifts.
What's really fun about that is a lot of times people will hear an example like that and they'll say, "Well, that all sounds good, but was that really how Regina was?" And I remember when you were saying that, I remembered a lot of times leaders would have me meet them in their office to coach, and I don't think we ever had
Oh,
coaching conversations in your office.
yeah.
It was always walking around the desk, walking over to
Yep.
trauma, walking into fast track,
Yes,
there. The coaching was always happening where the action was, and so
that's right.
you sort of put your money where your mouth was there. You kinda lived what you're talking about, which is probably why you have the confidence that you have to write that kind of
Right.
body of work with the book there. So, the thing I like about presence also is it doesn't cost anything.
That's
You're not
right.
having to go out and
No,
requisition a new piece of equipment or anything like that. It's just being there. You also mentioned some of the outcomes there, trust, safety, that psychological safety that you had
yes.
a while ago. And the ultimate
Yeah.
job of leaders is to get the roadblocks out of the way, get the
Yep.
barriers out of the way. What's holding us back from delivering that world-class service there
Absolutely.
as well. So I get the book, I read the book. In your heart of hearts as an ED nurse, an ED leader, and now an author, what do you hope leaders will do differently after they read your book?
Well, my biggest hope, and this, I don't want this to sound harsh, but my biggest hope is that they think about this and are not continually trying to push people to work harder instead of taking responsibility for fixing the systems and the things around these people that make their work so difficult, right?
Yeah.
I hope they lead with intention, um, and really, I want right? I don't want fear-based pressure on our people. I want it so that people can feel trust and love in their leader so that they can do their best work for our patients who will eventually be us.
You said earlier, it's not a soft skill. And I think that's what keeps people sometimes from thinking about how do I devote the time to this because it just seems so soft. And yet, as I think of the organizations that you've coached over the years, and then even most recently, ED leaders that you coach, what you're really doing is you're instilling this sense of ownership
Yeah,
as a leader. Because
that's right.
as I know the organizations that you coach very well,
Yeah,
sometimes it's easy to play the victim. And I think you have a particular talent in taking people from victim thinking to
yeah,
owner thinking. Does that
yeah.
sort of, support why the book got written?
Oh, totally. Totally. And, I have met so many leaders, our leaders and our nurses and physicians like at Hardin Medical Center. This is why I love them. Their work is hard work. They don't have all the resources in the world at all. And there they are. They come, they show up every day and just do such amazing work. And they listen, and this is an organization that may not have all the cash funds in the world either. And I know that's stressful, but they do that hard work. And that's who this book is written for. It's for leaders who, no matter what your circumstance, you can do something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the book is ready for folks to be able to
Yeah.
access. They can go to our website, which is www.healthcareplussg.com, and we'll put it in the banner of the podcast there as well. Up at the top, there's a menu item that says books. You click on that, you're going to see this beautiful red book called Rewiring the Emergency Department. Um, Regina, it's awesome to be able to have you on here, not just as a,
Thank
a
you.
colleague, but now almost a 2 decade long friend. I appreciate your
Yeah,
friendship. I appreciate the work that you do,
me as well.
and thanks for bringing this new body of work to bear for these new up and coming leaders and these leaders that have been trying their hardest already
That's right.
to be able to get a little of that Regina Shupe love.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina.
If you would like free resources and access to our latest books, articles, and industry insights, visit our website at healthcareplussg.com. We hope you'll join us next time as we continue our journey to make healthcare better for caregivers, patients, and communities.